Next, we're going to water the native plant nursery. So take the hose from the pavilion side of the greenhouse and we're going to take it all the way out there.
But you'll want to keep pulling until you come all the way over to the plant nursery, which is on the other side of both of the raised beds. You can go ahead and move on to watering the plants in the native nursery, which are all of these plants on the tables and also on the pallets there. It is very important when watering the native plant nursery that you understand the difference between wet and dry soil. Very dry soil will be loose and crumbly. The particulate will not hold together at all. It's sort of dry and dusty. And if you see that at the surface, make sure you dig down a couple inches and ensure that it's still dry down there. Sometimes only the top half inch of soil will be really dry, and lower down it'll be quite a bit more moist. But in this cup, everything is bone dry, so we're gonna make sure to water that really, really well. If you contrast that to this pot, which is very nice and moist, you can see that the soil is held together really well. The clumps and aggregates are not loose, they're not crumbly and dry, but they're nice and moist and they stay together in big clumps. And if you dig down, you'll notice that there's even moisture going all the way down, a couple knuckles deep into this pot. When you observe evenly moist soil, like in this pot, and in these pots over here, which are also nice and moist, you can water these minimally compared to this, which is really, really dry and crumbly and loose. This needs to be watered a lot. So when you see really, really dry soil, you're going to want to take your handheld nozzle and water it from the top for a couple seconds so that it's not overflowing, but for a good 5, maybe even 10 seconds, and then let it dry. Because at the surface, that will look nice and wet, but if you dig down, you'll notice that it's still really crumbly and loose in there. So we're gonna let that sort of soak up while we water everything else. So take the handheld nozzle on shower mode and apply the shower directly to the pot for 5 to 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Continue on like this until you've done every single pot on every single table, especially if you've observed ones that are really, really bone dry. You're going to want to take the hose and put it back onto the hose reel. And the easiest way to do this is to grab a couple points along the way to bring all that hose back over by the reel, and it'll be much more easy to reel if it's all sitting there on the ground. So I am carefully pulling all of this length of hose back over to the door, periodically picking up a little bit more at a time. And then I'm going to leave it all right here. Since it's so much closer to the hose reel, it's going to be a lot easier to get on there. Once you have the hose piled up close to the hose reel, the very last step of this chore is to turn off the water at the wall and then go ahead and wind the hose back onto the hose reel. I will show you that right now. I'm going to want to take one hand to guide the hose onto the hose reel. You're going to want to take your left hand to grab the crank on the reel itself and then carefully allow that hose to wind up on the reel. Make sure you're evenly winding it. You're not crisscrossing, you're not kinking, you're not otherwise binding up the hose. You're just evenly winding it onto the reel. Take your time and do it as tightly and as orderly as possible.